When a young woman rents out her home to a seemingly ordinary man, she discovers he's Nicolas Cage, the famous actor hiding from the paparazzi. But what secrets is he really keeping, and why her house? Welcome to our video. Today, we're diving into an incredible story of mystery, fame, and unexpected friendships. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another captivating story. Sophia had always loved her grandmother's old house, even if it came with creaky floors and a leaky roof. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood, it was her safe haven after her grandmother passed away. But the bills were piling up, and Sophia knew she had no choice but to rent out one of the rooms to keep the house running. She listed it online, praying someone decent would show up. The ad caught the attention of James, a quiet man in his late 40s. When Sophia opened the door to meet him, he stood there with a worn baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses hiding most of his face. His demeanor was polite but reserved, and Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying too hard not to be noticed. "Are you sure this is the kind of place you're looking for?" Sophia asked, a little skeptical. James nodded. "This is perfect. Quiet, no disturbances," he said, his voice calm but oddly familiar. Despite her initial reservations, Sophia agreed. He paid in cash, 6 months in advance. "I just need some peace and quiet," he had said. For the first few days, James was the perfect tenant, silent, respectful, and often staying out of sight. But peculiar things began to happen. Sophia noticed a luxury car parked down the street every evening, its engine idling as if waiting for someone. Strange deliveries started arriving for James. Gourmet meals in insulated bags, high-end skincare products, and once, an elaborate bouquet of fresh roses. One evening, her neighbor, Mrs. Harper, caught her outside. "Who's the man staying with you?" Mrs. Harper asked. "He looks awfully familiar." "Almost like..." Sophia laughed nervously, brushing off the comment. But her curiosity was piqued. That night, as she cleaned the shared kitchen, she spotted something sticking out of James' backpack, a letterhead with the name of a Hollywood production company embossed in gold. Just as she decided to confront him, a sleek black car pulled into her driveway, its headlights piercing through the curtains. Sophia froze as the black car idled in her driveway. She peered through the curtains, her heart pounding. The driver didn't step out, but the car stayed there for what felt like an eternity before backing away and disappearing into the night. The next morning, she decided she couldn't ignore the strange events anymore. Gathering her courage, Sophia knocked on James' door. He opened it, wearing his usual hat and sunglasses, even inside the house. "We need to talk," Sophia said firmly, crossing her arms. James raised an eyebrow. "Is something wrong?" "Who are you really, James? And don't say you're just a writer. Writers don't have gourmet meals delivered or letters from Hollywood production companies stuffed in their backpacks." For a moment, James stared at her, his face unreadable. Then he sighed, closing the door behind her. "All right," he said, taking off his sunglasses. "You deserve the truth." Sophia's jaw dropped. Without the sunglasses and hat, there was no mistaking him. He was Nicolas Cage, the iconic movie star. You're Nicolas Cage," she stammered. James, no, Nicholas, gave a small, almost weary smile. "I am. But I'm also James for now. I needed to escape. The paparazzi, the scandals, everything." Sophia sank into a chair, trying to process what she'd just learned. "Why my house? Why this small town? It's quiet, and no one would think to look for me here," Nicholas replied. "But I swear, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need some time to sort things out." Sophia hesitated but nodded. "Fine. But you should know, people are already suspicious. My neighbor recognized you, and last night, there was a car parked in the driveway. Are you sure it's safe here?" Nicholas's face darkened. "A car? What kind of car?" Sophia described it, and his expression shifted to one of worry. "That's not good. They've found me." "Who?" Sophia asked, her voice rising. "Paparazzi, maybe," Nicholas said, pacing. "Or worse, someone from my past who doesn't want me to stay hidden." Just as they were talking, there was a knock at the front door. Sophia glanced at Nicholas, panic flashing in her eyes. "What do we do?" she whispered. "Don't answer it," he said, his voice low and urgent. The knock came again, louder this time. Sophia's heart raced as she tiptoed to the window, pulling back the curtain just slightly. Standing on the porch was a man in a suit, holding an envelope. As Sophia debated whether to open the door, Nicholas's phone buzzed. The text on the screen read, "You can't hide forever." The knock grew more insistent. Sophia and Nicholas exchanged a tense glance, both unsure of their next move. Finally, Sophia whispered, "If we ignore him, he might get suspicious. Let me handle this." Nicholas hesitated, then nodded reluctantly, retreating to his room. Sophia smoothed her shirt, steeling herself, and opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. The man in the suit looked up, his expression neutral, but his sharp eyes scanning her. "Miss, I'm looking for a man named James. He might also go by Nicholas. I have something for him." Sophia felt her pulse quicken, but kept her face neutral. "I'm sorry, there's no one here by that name." The man's lips curled into a faint smile as he held up an envelope. "If you do see him, make sure he gets this." He placed the envelope on the porch and walked away without another word. Sophia closed the door, her hands trembling as she picked up the envelope. Nicholas emerged from his room, his expression grave. "What did he say?" Nicholas asked, his voice low. "He said it was for you," Sophia replied, holding out the envelope. Nicholas stared at it, his jaw tightening. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the letter inside. As he read, his face grew pale. "What is it?" Sophia asked, unable to hide her concern. Nicholas hesitated, then handed her the letter. It was a legal document, a summons to appear in court. But what caught Sophia's attention was the handwritten note at the bottom. "You thought you could disappear, but you owe me. Time's up." "Who's this from?" Sophia asked. "It's complicated," Nicholas muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Let's just say I made a mistake years ago. A deal I shouldn't have taken. And now they've come to collect." Sophia's heart sank. "Are you in danger?" "Possibly," he admitted. "But it's not just about me. If they know I'm here, you could be dragged into this too." Before they could discuss further, the power suddenly went out, plunging the house into darkness. Sophia gasped, her mind racing. "Is this a coincidence?" Nicholas shook his head, his instincts on high alert. "Stay close to me," he said, grabbing a flashlight from his backpack. As they moved cautiously through the house, the sound of footsteps outside froze them in place. Nicholas peeked out the window, and his face went white. "It's not just one person," he whispered. "There's a group of them, and they're heading straight for the house." Sophia clutched Nicholas's arm, her breath shallow as she whispered, "What do we do? Should we call the police?" Nicholas shook his head. "If it's who I think it is, they won't stick around long enough for the cops to catch them. And if they're after me, getting law enforcement involved could make things worse." Sophia tried to steady herself, but her nerves were fraying. "You're telling me these people can just show up, threaten us, and walk away?" "They're not amateurs," Nicholas said grimly. "They've been watching, waiting for the right moment. That envelope was their way of letting me know they're serious." The footsteps grew louder, crunching the gravel just outside the house. Nicholas grabbed Sophia's hand and led her to the back of the house, away from the windows. "Stay here," he whispered. "What?" "No," Sophia whispered back fiercely. "You're not going out there alone." "I won't let them hurt you," Nicholas insisted. "I'll talk to them, but you have to stay out of sight." Sophia hesitated, torn between fear and the urge to stand by him. But before she could argue further, the sound of glass shattering in the living room made them both jump. Nicholas looked at Sophia. "Change of plans. We're both getting out of here. Now." He grabbed his backpack, slinging it over his shoulder, and motioned for her to follow him toward the back door. Just as they reached it, a figure stepped into their path, a tall man in a black hoodie, his face obscured by shadows. "Going somewhere?" the man asked, his voice cold and menacing. Sophia froze, but Nicholas stepped in front of her. "Leave her out of this," he said firmly. The man chuckled. "Relax, Cage. We're not here for her. But if you don't cooperate, things might get messy." As the man stepped closer, Sophia spotted another figure in the hallway behind him. Someone she didn't recognize, but who seemed to be signaling her to run. Sophia's heart pounded as she locked eyes with the second figure in the hallway. He motioned for her to run, pressing a finger to his lips as if to signal silence. She couldn't tell if he was friend or foe, but one thing was clear. She and Nicholas couldn't stay here. "Stay behind me," Nicholas whispered, his voice steady but tense. The man in the hoodie sneered. "Come on, Cage. We don't have all night. You owe us, and we're here to collect. What do you want?" Nicholas asked, his tone calm but sharp. "Simple. You come with us, no fuss. If you don't, well..." The man's gaze flickered to Sophia, making the threat clear without needing to say more. Nicholas clenched his fists. "Fine. Just let her go, and I'll come with you." "No deal," the man said with a smirk. "She stays here. Call it insurance." Sophia felt panic rising, but before she could speak, the second figure in the hallway moved closer. She could see him more clearly now, a younger man with sharp features and a determined expression. He held up a small object, something metallic that glinted faintly in the dim light. In a swift motion, the young man lunged forward, slamming the object, a stun gun, into the hooded man's side. The hooded man crumpled to the floor with a grunt, and Nicholas wasted no time. He grabbed Sophia's hand and bolted for the back door. The young man called after them, "Go. I'll hold them off." "Who are you?" Nicholas shouted, but the man waved him off. "No time, just run." Sophia and Nicholas dashed into the backyard, the cool night air biting at their skin. They could hear shouts and commotion inside the house as more figures scrambled after them. "Do you trust him?" Sophia asked between gasps for breath. "I don't know," Nicholas admitted. "But right now, he's buying us time." They reached the edge of the yard, where a dense line of trees offered cover. Nicholas pulled Sophia into the shadows just as a flashlight beam swept across the lawn. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice barely audible. They crouched in the underbrush, listening as the group inside the house spread out, their voices growing louder. Just when it seemed safe, a hand clamped down on Sophia's shoulder from behind, and a gruff voice said, "Going somewhere?" Sophia's breath hitched as she spun around, expecting the worst. But instead of a threatening figure, she found herself face to face with the young man from earlier, the one who had saved them from the hooded man inside the house. His face was now illuminated by the dim glow of a flashlight, his features tense but determined. "I told you to run," he said urgently, his voice low but commanding. Sophia was too stunned to speak, but Nicholas stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The young man glanced around, clearly on edge. "I'm on your side for now. You both need to get out of here before they figure out where you went." "Who's after us?" Nicholas asked, his voice rough with frustration. "Doesn't matter," the young man replied, his eyes darting nervously. "What matters is that they're dangerous. You two have to disappear now. I'll help you, but you can't stay here any longer." Sophia's mind raced. "But what about you? What if they come after you?" "I'm not the one they're after," he said. "They're after him." He nodded toward Nicholas. "I'm just a temporary distraction." Nicholas was silent for a moment, clearly processing the situation. "Why are you helping us? What do you want in return?" The young man hesitated. "I'm not doing this for free, but let's just say I have my own reasons. I'll explain later. Right now, we need to move." Before either of them could respond, a low rumble of voices echoed from the edge of the property, more of the group closing in. The man quickly grabbed Nicholas's arm and pulled him toward a narrow path leading into the woods. Nicholas and Sophia followed without question, the urgency in the air palpable. Every step felt like it could be their last. They weren't sure who to trust anymore, but with no other option, they had to keep moving. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sound of footsteps grew fainter, but Sophia's nerves were on edge. Her thoughts kept returning to the letter, to the mysterious threat Nicholas was facing. "What's going on, Nicholas?" she asked in a hushed voice. "Why are they after you? What happened?" Nicholas was silent for a moment, his gaze distant, as if he were trying to piece together the past in his mind. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with regret. "I made a mistake a long time ago. I thought I could leave it all behind, start fresh. But it's never that simple." Suddenly, the young man stopped in his tracks, his eyes scanning the area. "We've got to split up," he said urgently. "They're getting closer." He turned to Nicholas. "You're going to have to trust me. I'll get her to safety. You go in the opposite direction and keep them off your trail." Sophia's heart pounded as she realized the gravity of the situation. They were about to separate, with no guarantee they'd be able to reunite. Sophia stood frozen, her eyes locked onto the young man as he gave his final instructions. "You'll be fine," he said, though his voice was tinged with uncertainty. "Just follow me, and don't look back." Nicholas exchanged a tense look with her. His face was drawn, the weight of everything pressing down on him. "This isn't ideal," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But it's the best option we have right now." Sophia felt a pang of panic, a wave of doubt crashing over her. "But I don't want to leave you." "I'll be fine," Nicholas said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his eyes. "Trust me, we'll figure this out. But you need to be safe, and you're safer with him than with me right now. I'll find you, I promise." Sophia's heart clenched at his words. She wanted to argue, to stay and fight beside him, but the danger in his eyes, the fear, the resolve, told her this was the only choice. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. "Go with him," Nicholas urged. "Please." Her chest felt tight as she nodded, her throat too dry to speak. The young man grabbed her hand and pulled her into the darkness, urging her to keep moving as they ran deeper into the forest. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, and with each step, Sophia's fear grew. The trees seemed to close in around her, the air growing thick with tension. She could hear her own breath, ragged and fast, and the sound of the young man's footsteps beside her. Just as Sophia was beginning to think they might be safe, a voice broke through the silence, sending chills down her spine. "Where are you going?" Sophia's blood ran cold as she turned to see another figure stepping out from behind a tree. It was a man, his face half covered by a mask, his eyes piercing and cold. "Who are you?" Sophia demanded, her voice trembling. The masked man smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "I'm the one who's going to make sure you don't get away." The young man by her side quickly stepped in front of her, his body tense with readiness. "We don't have time for this." But before anyone could make a move, the masked man raised his hand. "You don't understand. It's too late for escape. We've been watching both of you for a long time." The young man didn't hesitate. In a swift motion, he pulled out something from his pocket, a small device, and pressed a button. A bright light flashed, blinding the masked man, and in that moment they bolted again, running faster than ever. The path ahead was still dark, but the end was in sight, a small cabin nestled among the trees, barely visible from where they stood. Sophia's legs burned with exhaustion, but they couldn't stop now. They couldn't turn back. Sophia stumbled through the forest, her breath coming in gasps as she kept pace with the young man. Her heart pounded not just from the run, but from the masked man's ominous words. "We've been watching both of you for a long time." What did that mean? How long was long? The cabin loomed closer, a weathered structure with a dim light flickering inside. It felt like a mirage, a fragile promise of safety in the middle of chaos. The young man glanced back to ensure Sophia was still behind him before motioning for her to keep moving. "We can hide here for a while," he said, his voice low but urgent. Sophia hesitated. "What if they find us?" "They won't," he said, though his tone lacked confidence. "Trust me." Nicholas wasn't with her, and the thought made her chest tighten. She wanted to believe in this young man, but trust was in short supply. Still, she had no choice. They reached the cabin door, and the young man pushed it open cautiously. Inside, the space was bare except for a small table, 2 chairs, and a stack of blankets on the floor. A lantern flickered weakly in the corner, casting long shadows across the walls. "Sit," he said, locking the door behind them. Sophia slumped into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. "Who are you?" she asked finally, her voice shaking. The young man leaned against the door, his expression unreadable. "My name's Caleb. That's all you need to know right now." "Why are you helping us, Caleb?" she pressed. Caleb hesitated, his eyes darkening. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted. And because Nicholas helped me once. I owe him." Before Caleb could explain, a loud thud echoed against the cabin door. Sophia's eyes widened in terror. "They found us," she whispered. Caleb grabbed the lantern, blew out the flame, and motioned for her to stay quiet. In the pitch-black darkness, Sophia could hear her own heartbeat, deafeningly loud in her ears. A second thud rattled the door, followed by the sound of a lock being picked. "They're breaking in," Caleb murmured. Sophia's stomach churned. She clutched the edge of the table, her nails digging into the wood. "What do we do?" "We fight," Caleb said, his voice steely. He pulled a knife from his boot and handed it to her. "If they get through, aim for the leg. It's your best chance." Just as the door creaked open, a deafening sound cut through the air, gunfire. But the shots weren't coming from inside the cabin. They were coming from outside. The attackers froze, and Caleb peered through a crack in the wall. His face lit up with recognition. "It's Nicholas," he whispered. The gunfire echoed through the forest like a war cry, sending the attackers scattering into the shadows. Caleb opened the door cautiously, revealing Nicholas, standing tall and resolute, a handgun in his grip. His face was etched with determination, but his eyes softened the moment he saw Sophia. "You're okay," Nicholas said, his voice filled with relief. He rushed to her side, gently cupping her face as if to reassure himself that she was unharmed. Sophia's heart swelled with emotion. I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I promised, didn't I?" he said, giving her a faint smile. "I always keep my promises." Caleb interrupted their moment. "We don't have much time. They'll regroup and come back stronger. We need to get out of here now." Nicholas nodded, his demeanor shifting back to survival mode. "There's a car stashed about half a mile from here. I managed to take out one of their vehicles earlier. If we're fast, we can use it to get to safety." Sophia glanced between the two men. "And then what? They're not just going to stop, are they?" Nicholas hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. "No, they won't. But we'll deal with that once we're out of immediate danger." As they stepped outside the cabin, the faint sound of a helicopter in the distance stopped them in their tracks. The attackers were escalating their efforts. "Helicopters," Caleb said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Who are these people, Nicholas?" "It's complicated," Nicholas admitted, his jaw tightening. "But let's just say they have deep pockets and powerful connections." They moved quickly, keeping low as they navigated through the dense forest. The helicopter's spotlight swept through the trees, narrowly missing them several times. Sophia's heart raced as she clung to Nicholas's arm, her fear mounting with every step. Finally, they reached the hidden car, a nondescript sedan parked beneath a canopy of leaves. Nicholas unlocked it and ushered them inside. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked, her voice shaking as Nicholas started the engine. "There's a safe house a few hours from here," Nicholas said, his eyes flicking between the rearview mirror and the road ahead. "It's off the grid. They won't find us there." As they sped down the narrow road, Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face paling. "It's a warning," Caleb said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've got people waiting for us up ahead." Sophia's breath caught. "What do we do now?" Nicholas's grip on the wheel tightened. "We don't stop. If they want to corner us, they'll have to catch us first." The tension in the car was palpable as Nicholas floored the accelerator, the road stretching endlessly before them. The enemies were closing in from all sides, and the safe house seemed farther away than ever. The car roared down the winding forest road, the sound of its engine swallowed by the night. In the rearview mirror, Nicholas caught the faint glow of headlights, closer than he'd hoped. "They're on us," he muttered, his voice a mix of frustration and determination. Sophia sat rigid in the back seat, gripping the door handle. What do we do if they catch up? They won't, Nicholas said, though his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Not if I can help it. Caleb leaned forward from the passenger seat. We'll need more than speed. They've got numbers. Do you have a plan? Plan. Nicholas shot Caleb a sharp look. Right now, the plan is to survive. The road twisted sharply, bordered by steep cliffs on one side and dense forest on the other. As Nicholas expertly maneuvered the car, the headlights behind them grew brighter, accompanied by the ominous sound of engines revving. Just as the car rounded a bend, a black SUV swerved into view from a side road, blocking their path. Brace yourselves, Nicholas shouted, slamming on the brakes. The tires screeched as the car skidded to a halt, stopping mere feet from the SUV. Sophia's heart hammered in her chest. They've got us, she cried, panic creeping into her voice. The SUV's doors opened, and armed men stepped out, their faces obscured by masks. Caleb cursed under his breath. We're surrounded. Nicholas didn't waste a second. Stay low, he commanded, reaching under his seat and pulling out a concealed pistol. What are you doing? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Ending this, Nicholas replied, his tone grim. He flung open the car door and fired a warning shot into the air, startling the men into ducking for cover. Caleb seized the opportunity to grab a crowbar from the trunk, while Sophia crouched low in the back seat, her hands trembling. As the gunfire echoed through the night, another sound emerged, a low rumble growing louder by the second. What's that? Caleb asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. From the cliffside, a large transport truck barreled toward the SUV blocking the road. Its headlights pierced the darkness, and its horn blared as it careened straight for the attackers. The men scrambled to clear the road, but the truck didn't slow down. It rammed into the SUV, sending it skidding off the edge of the cliff. Sophia's mouth fell open in shock. Who's driving that truck? Nicholas smirked, his confidence returning. An old friend. The truck came to a halt, and the driver jumped out, a woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. She nodded at Nicholas. Thought you could use a hand, she said. Perfect timing, Clara, Nicholas replied, relief evident in his voice. Sophia looked between Nicholas and the mysterious Clara, questions burning in her mind. But there was no time for answers. Get in the truck, Clara ordered. This road's compromised, and they'll be back soon. As they piled into the truck, Nicholas shot Sophia a reassuring glance. This isn't over yet, but we're getting closer to safety. The truck rumbled down an overgrown back road, the forest around them swallowing the sound. Inside the cabin, the tension was palpable, broken only by the occasional crackle of the radio. Clara kept her eyes on the road, her hands steady on the wheel, while Nicholas sat beside her, deep in thought. In the back, Sophia leaned against the window, her mind racing. Who is she? She finally asked, her voice breaking the uneasy silence. Clara glanced at her in the rearview mirror, but didn't speak. Nicholas cleared his throat. Clara's an old friend. She used to work in security, top-level stuff. More like cleaning up your messes, Clara interjected with a smirk. Sophia's eyes narrowed. So, you've been in trouble like this before? Nicholas sighed, running a hand through his hair. Not exactly like this. But when you're in the public eye, you make enemies. Some of them don't forget. Caleb, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. This isn't just about paparazzi or obsessed fans, is it? Who are these people? Nicholas hesitated, his jaw tightening. Finally, he said, they're connected to a deal I backed out of years ago. Something I should never have been involved in. They lost a lot of money because of me, and now they want payback. Before anyone could press further, the truck jerked to a sudden stop, throwing them forward. Clara cursed under her breath. We've got a problem. Sophia craned her neck to see through the windshield. A makeshift barricade of felled trees and debris blocked the road ahead. Beyond it, shadows moved among the trees. They're here, Nicholas said grimly. Clara reached under her seat and pulled out a shotgun. We're not going down without a fight. No, Nicholas said, holding up a hand. We can't keep fighting them head-on. We need a plan. Sophia's voice was shaky. What do they want from you, Nicholas? If it's money, can't you just pay them off? It's not that simple, Nicholas replied, his tone heavy with regret. They don't just want money, they want revenge. And they'll use anyone I care about to get it. Sophia's stomach dropped. So, we're all targets now. Just as Clara prepared to reverse the truck, a voice crackled over the radio. Nicolas Cage, the voice drawled chillingly calm. You can run, but you can't hide forever. We're everywhere. The voice was unfamiliar, but its menace was unmistakable. Nicholas's face hardened as he grabbed the radio. Then come and get me, he said, his voice low and steady. But leave them out of this. The response was a cold laugh. Too late for that. The line went dead, leaving an eerie silence in the cabin. What do we do now? Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. Nicholas turned to her, his eyes blazing with determination. We don't let them win. No matter what it takes. The truck hummed in the eerie silence as Nicholas's words hung in the air. Clara tapped her fingers on the steering wheel, her eyes scanning the woods around them. Caleb was pale, his jaw clenched. Sophia, though frightened, found herself leaning into Nicholas's unwavering resolve. We can't keep running forever, Clara said finally. They're too well organized. We need to make a stand. Nicholas nodded. Agreed. But we do it smart. Sophia hesitated. What does that mean? We're outnumbered, outgunned, and completely in the dark about what's coming next. That's where they underestimate us, Nicholas said, a flicker of a plan forming in his mind. Clara, is there anywhere nearby where we can set a trap? Clara smirked. You're not as hopeless as you look, Cage. There's an abandoned quarry about 2 miles from here. It's secluded, and the terrain gives us the upper hand. Perfect, Nicholas said. We'll lure them in and use the surroundings to our advantage. As the truck began reversing away from the barricade, gunfire erupted from the woods. Get down! Clara yelled, flooring the accelerator. The truck swerved sharply as bullets pinged off the metal exterior. Sophia clung to the seat, her heart pounding. We're not going to make it. Yes, we are, Nicholas said firmly, his hand gripping hers for a fleeting moment. Clara expertly navigated the forest trail, her confidence unshaken. The attackers' vehicles roared behind them, headlights slicing through the darkness. Finally, the quarry came into view, a vast, rocky expanse surrounded by steep cliffs. Clara skidded the truck to a halt near the edge. This is it. Everyone out. They scrambled out of the truck and began setting up makeshift defenses with whatever they could find, rocks, scrap metal, even fallen branches. Nicholas took command, his years of action roles now feeling eerily real. We use the high ground, he instructed. Clara, take cover by the truck and hold them off. Caleb, you and I will take the ridge. Sophia. He paused, meeting her eyes. Stay here, behind the truck. Stay safe. Sophia bristled. I'm not hiding while everyone else fights. I can help. No, Nicholas said firmly. Your safety is what matters most. Just as they finished positioning themselves, the attackers' vehicles rolled into the quarry, engines rumbling ominously. From the lead car, a man stepped out, a figure clad in black, his face partially obscured by shadows. He clapped slowly, mockingly. Well done, Cage, the man said, his voice eerily familiar. Leading us right to your little hideout. I expected nothing less. Nicholas froze, his eyes narrowing. Victor, he said, his voice laced with venom. Sophia's breath hitched. Who is he? An old mistake, Nicholas replied darkly. Victor smirked. Let's settle this once and for all, shall we? The quarry fell silent, the hum of engines fading as Victor stepped forward, his men fanning out behind him. The faint moonlight illuminated his face, a chilling mix of smugness and malice. Nicolas Cage, Victor said, dragging out the name. The man who cost me everything. And for what? A clean conscience. Nicholas stood tall, his face resolute. You destroyed lives, Victor. People lost everything because of you. Walking away was the best decision I ever made. Victor's laughter echoed across the quarry. And now you've dragged these poor people into your mess. How noble. Clara tightened her grip on the shotgun. Caleb crouched by the ridge, his heart pounding as he watched Victor's men disperse, weapons in hand. Sophia, crouching behind the truck, peeked around the corner, her pulse racing. "We don't have to do this," Nicholas called out. "Leave them out of it, and I'll come with you." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you'll come with me, all right. But not before I've made my point. It's not enough for you to lose. It's about making sure you suffer first." Victor raised his hand, signaling his men to advance. Suddenly, bright lights flooded the quarry as hidden spotlights mounted on Victor's vehicles came to life, blinding Nicholas and his group. "Move!" Clara yelled, firing a warning shot into the air. The blast echoed, momentarily scattering Victor's men. Sophia scrambled to Nicholas's side, her voice trembling. "We have to do something. They're closing in." Nicholas grabbed her hand. "Stick to the plan. Trust me." From the ridge, Caleb shouted, "Incoming." A group of Victor's men attempted to flank them, but Caleb hurled a rock, dislodging a pile of debris that tumbled down, forcing them to retreat. Victor's men had rigged the truck with explosives. The blast sent Clara sprawling, her shotgun skidding out of reach. "Clara!" Nicholas yelled, running to her. She groaned, clutching her side, but managed a weak smile. "Still here, Cage. Don't worry about me." Victor stepped forward again, his men regrouping. "You're out of tricks, Nicholas. Surrender, and maybe I'll be generous." But Nicholas's eyes weren't on Victor. They were scanning the quarry, searching for something, anything, that could turn the tide. His gaze landed on a towering stack of loose boulders perched precariously above Victor's men. Sophia followed his line of sight. "You're not serious," she whispered. Nicholas turned to her, his face grim. "It's our only shot." With a nod to Caleb, Nicholas shouted, "Get ready to push." Nicholas and Caleb scrambled to the ridge, their hearts pounding as Victor's men closed in. The towering stack of boulders loomed above, teetering on the edge of collapse. Below, Clara and Sophia took cover behind the wreckage of the truck, their eyes darting between Nicholas and the advancing attackers. Victor stood confidently in the open, his arms spread wide. "What's the plan, Cage? A last stand? A heroic speech? Go on, entertain me." Nicholas ignored him, shouting to Caleb, "We need to hit that weak spot." He pointed to a single wedge-shaped rock holding the entire stack in place. Caleb nodded, his hands trembling as he grabbed a heavy iron rod they'd found earlier. Together, they jammed it under the base of the stack, using all their strength to create leverage. As they strained against the rod, one of Victor's men spotted them. "They're on the ridge," the man shouted, firing a shot that grazed Caleb's arm. He cried out in pain, falling to his knees. "Caleb!" Nicholas grabbed the rod, shielding him with his body. "I've got this. Get back down to the others." Caleb shook his head, his face pale but determined. "No way. I'm not leaving you up here alone." Victor smirked as he noticed the commotion. "What's the matter, Cage? Running out of options." He gestured for his men to surround the ridge. Sophia, from her hiding spot, saw what was happening. "We have to help them," she said, her voice urgent. Clara winced but forced herself upright, grabbing her shotgun. "Let's give them some cover." She fired several rounds into the air, forcing Victor's men to duck for cover. This gave Nicholas and Caleb the critical seconds they needed. With a final desperate push, the rod broke through the base of the stack. The boulders groaned and shifted, the entire pile collapsing like a massive wave. The boulders crashed down, scattering Victor's men and blocking the vehicle's exit. But Victor himself narrowly escaped, stumbling back as dust and debris filled the air. Victor's triumphant smirk was gone, replaced by rage. "You think this is over, Cage?" he snarled, pulling a concealed handgun from his jacket. Before he could aim, Clara fired her shotgun, hitting the ground near Victor's feet. "Try it, and you won't walk away this time," she growled. Victor froze, realizing he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. His men were either injured or fleeing, the boulders sealing off any chance of reinforcements. Nicholas descended from the ridge, his face calm but resolute. "It's over, Victor. Walk away and don't come back." Victor's jaw tightened, but he knew he had lost. With a glare that promised vengeance, he lowered his gun and retreated into the shadows. As dawn broke over the quarry, the group sat together by the wrecked truck, their exhaustion giving way to relief. Clara leaned back with a groan. "Well, Cage, I didn't think you had it in you." Nicholas smiled faintly. "Neither did I." Sophia turned to him, her voice soft. "Why didn't you tell us the truth from the start?" Nicholas sighed. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that my past would hurt the people I cared about. But I see now that secrets don't protect anyone. They just make things worse." Caleb clapped him on the shoulder. "You've got a lot to fix, Cage. But for what it's worth, you're not half bad." As they prepared to leave the quarry, Nicholas turned to Sophia. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." Sophia smiled. "You've got a long way to go, but maybe you're worth it." Back in the safety of her small town, Sophia watched Nicholas drive off with a mix of relief and hope. The man who had entered her life as a mystery had left as someone she could call a friend. Life returned to normal, but the experience had changed her forever. Trust, courage, and the unexpected bonds of friendship had reshaped her view of the world. And as for Nicholas, he stepped back into the spotlight, but this time, with a deeper appreciation for the people who stood by him when the cameras weren't rolling. Thank you for joining this incredible story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more unforgettable tales. Until next time.